Hey, this is Professor Homa. Welcome to part 2 of EX10 web fonts using Google Fonts. And I'm in brackets, and I have my EX9 folder open, and that's the one with the dentist site. The last thing we did was the responsive design on it, and now we're going to add some web fonts. And again, we're going to change the body to a little bit of a thinner sans serif. You don't have to use the same fonts I'm using. You could pick out some other fonts that you want to try out. But I'm going to use the ones that I had picked, the Roboto Slab and the Source Sans Pro, I believe. And I'm going to go back to Google Fonts. I'm still there. I have the page open, and it tells you exactly what to do. It says add this code to your website. So I'm going to highlight, and keep in mind it has to be on every page that you have. It could be, in your style sheet once when you actually specify fonts, but you have to have it on every page so that every page links to it. So just be aware of that. You don't just put it on your home page. So I'm going to copy this code. I copied it, and I'm going to go back to brackets, and basically I like to put it right after my regular CSS. So I'm going to put that there, and that's basically, it already has the fonts in it that it's going to use, that it's going to link to and pull down, but I just have to make sure I specify them in my CSS, kind of where and when I want to use them in my CSS. So that's all I have to do with my index. It's not going to use them yet because I didn't specify them in my CSS, but now I'm going to go to my CSS and what Google Fonts tells you to do. And if I go down here, it tells you exactly how to put them in your CSS. You just put the name in here. It puts them with just single quotes, and I don't think there's a problem if you put double quotes, but it always puts a single quote, so I've always just kept it like that. Plus, it kind of indicates to me that it's a web font or a Google font as well. So I just leave it like that. Now, when you copy these into your CSS, you can't copy just one thing. It copies the whole line, so you might have to delete some other stuff when you do that, especially if you have a style there already that says font family. So I'm going to copy this Source Sans Pro, and I'm just going to copy it. I'm going to go back to my brackets, and I'm going to go into my style sheet, and I'm going to put it right here in my body where I have font family. So I'm just going to copy it right in the front here. And you can see there's my Source Sans Pro. Now I'm going to get rid of this sans serif because I already have it at the end. So I'm going to backspace. And it's going to use Source Sans Pro and then Calibri, Tahoma, and then Arial. Now I can also put in here, one thing I don't have in here is I could put in the weight. So one thing I should put in here, so that it uses the same weight, I'm going to put font weight. And I'm going to use 300. Because that's what I specified. I specified using the light version of the font. So I want to make sure that I put that in there. So there's my font weight 300, so it uses that light version of the font from Source Sans Pro. Okay, that's for the body copy. Now that's going to use that for everything. There's other places where it's going to use the bold. And remember, the bold, I believe, and if you're not sure, go here and look, is the 700. So it's also going to use the 700. So I'm going to look for wherever I have bold in here, and I think in my web page, I actually have bold in the navigation on the left side, and I think it should do that here. It says font weight bold, so I could put in here 700 where it's using that. I could put in 700 and see how that looks, and I think that's it. Now here's my H1 section main H1, and let me just take a look at this again, just so you can see where this is. I'll open it up in my preview, and here it actually, look how nice that looks. It's nice, kind of very, very light font, actually lighter than I thought. It's still using the Georgia up here, but it's using that nice light font in here. It's using that nice heavy bold down there, so it looks nice. Even here, it's still using the lighter one, even though I didn't even specify that yet. It seems to be using the italic correctly. One thing, I am going to change this one. I'm going to use the Roboto Slab for this one. And down here, I don't like these real light like that. So I could either take it off and just put the Calibri back, or I could just use the bold and see how that looks. But I might have to, just kind of try some things out a little bit. So I'm going to go back to brackets, and I'm going to go down here's where I have my H1. And what I'll do is I'll just put that Roboto Slab in there. And I could go to Google Fonts and just see how it has it. It has Roboto Slab. You know what? I don't even have to copy that. I'm just going to put Roboto Slab with single quotes. I don't need to go through all that, unless you feel you might have a problem typing it, but or spelling it. But they're all O's in there except for slab. So I'm just going to go back to brackets, and I'm just going to put in, for my first one here, I'm going to put just one quote, and I'll put Roboto Slab. And if you don't type well, or if you're prone to typos, which I'm doing right now, Okay, there's Roboto Slab, and I also might want to put a font weight here, just so I know. Although, even though H1s actually do make a bold automatically, I just want to make sure that I'm using the right weight, and I think I'm using a 700. So I'm still going to put this in here, just so it does the right weight. I'm going to put 700 in here. So I'm using font family, Roboto Slab, and I'm going to see how this looks right now. I'm just going to save this, and I'm going to go back to here, and there it is. Now let me just click off of that. And let me refresh this here because it's putting that border around it. So there's my slab. Now again, it's not a lot different, but if you had some kind of blog or something where you wanted a nice headline, that's kind of a nice kind of slab serif font, something a little different than your typical office type fonts. Now I do want to fix this down here. I don't want to have they look really light. I hardly even see them, so I'm going to put them in bold. Now I have to find where those fonts are at. And again, if you haven't worked with this in a while, you have to remember that it's kind of in the bottom section. If you're not sure, look at your index page and look for your links. Here's my links down here, and they're in the nav bottom section. So I could do this through the nav bottom ID, and make them bold in there. I could do it through the UL. A couple places I could do it, but I'm just going to go back and I'll look for my nav bottom and try to figure out where those fonts are. Now keep in mind, stay out of your media query right now, but I'm going to go down and look for nav bottom, and there's text align left, but there's no font specified in there, so maybe I'll specify a font, and I'm just going to put in font weight because it's already using the Source Sans Pro, but I'm just going to put in a font weight and just make sure that it uses bold, that it uses the 700. I'm going to put that in there, and I'll save it, and I'll go take a look and see what it looks like, and I'll refresh it, and it didn't do anything yet. So let me font weight, footer, nav bottom. Oh, wait a minute. I'm in a media query here. I just said to watch, so let me cut this out of here. I went down. Okay, yeah, this is where I should be. I should be up here, footer, nav bottom. I went down too far into my media query. So I'm going to put it here in footer, nav bottom here. And I'm going to save it. And I'm going to check it out. And now it should be bold. Now it's really going across the page. It's almost too heavy. So I can make it a little smaller if I want to. That may be something I may have to do. Or I may take it out of that font. If I want to make it smaller, I would use font size. And I could use like an M, where I could do like a 0.9 M, which would be like 90%. So I could do that and just see what that looks, if it looks better. If I like the fonts looking like that. And if I think it's too small and too bold, because if they're bold and they're small, it loses the little kind of open areas inside of it. It may make them a little harder to read. So what I could do, if I didn't like that altogether, I could just get rid of this stuff. I could go back up to where my font is in here and just go font family and highlight these. And highlight this whole font family thing and go back down to nav bottom. And again, make sure you stay out of your media query. And here I am. And I'm going to paste this in here. Except I'm just going to take out Source Sans Pro, and I'm just going to use the Calibri because that's what it had originally, and it looked fine like that. So I'm just going to say that. So I can kind of overwrite, because I have Source Sans Pro in my body, it's using everything in body. So if you need to overwrite it, either for navigation or for whatever, you could put it in here. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to go back, check it out again. This stuff looks okay. I didn't know how this would show up, but that actually looks fine. And now it's back in the, and actually it looks very, even though I'm specifying Calibri here, it looks really light. So it may still be trying to use that 300 weight. So I'm actually going to put in a font weight here, just to make sure I override this. And I'll just put in font weight of 400 because it looks like it may be making it a little too light. So let me save that again. Okay, now it looks a little normal. That looks like normal Calibri down at the bottom. And again, you can mess around with some of these font weights here, and it's also using this font here. So that's pretty much using Google Fonts. You could go out and use any font you want, and basically you're kind of borrowing it from Google. Now, if you're working on Internet Explorer, you may not see these unless you actually put it up on a server to see the fonts. But if you're working in Chrome, you should be able to see it, or I think even Firefox too. You should be able to see the fonts, as long as you're connected to the internet. you should be able to see the fonts in there because that link should work. So that's just a little preview of Google Fonts. Again, just a quick review that you have to basically specify the font, anywhere you normally specify fonts, and you just put a little quote around them, the little single quote. And also, and here I'm using it up here, Source Sans Pro. So you just put them in a CSS file like you normally would, but the only difference is in every page where they're being used, you just copy that link from the Google Fonts page. Now it doesn't save these forever. When you go back to Google Fonts, you pretty much close out. But I'm using the two families right now, so you can't really log in and save this kind of stuff. But now it's in my file, so I know it's in there. So, and anytime you can go back. So, you might want to go there and check out some of these fonts. I'm gonna close out of this right now. And this isn't the only way. This is just one way to do it. So keep in mind, there's other ways to put other fonts. There's other places to find fonts. You could go to Font Squirrel, download fonts, and put special web fonts into a folder and upload them to a server and use those using the @font face. So there's different ways to do it, but just for now, try out the Google Fonts, get a heading and a body copy into your dentist site, and I'll check it out when you're done with it, and make sure, and that'll count as exercise 10.